On this episode of China Uncensored, 2013's top 10 most important stories from China. Hi, welcome to China Uncensored. I'm your host, Chris Chappell. So to ring in the new year, I've created two top 10 lists for 2013. The top 10 craziest stories and the top 10 actually important news events. This is the important one. The crazy ones I'll release later this week. It was a big year in China. A lot happened. So I'm going to rank this chronologically because they're all pretty important. Number 10, hacking. In February, Mandiant, a cybersecurity firm, released a report saying the Chinese military is targeting U.S. companies, as well as smaller U.S. local, state, and federal government agencies and international governmental organizations overseas. They were even able to trace the hackers to the fringe of Shanghai, somewhere in the vicinity of this building. It's home to a Chinese military unit within the 2nd Bureau of the People's Liberation Army General Staff Department, 3rd Department, codename Unit 61398. Sounds like they caught the bad guys, eh? Not so fast. There's one tiny hole in their logic. The Chinese military isn't even involved in hacking. I mean, just look at this footage from state-run CCTV. The Chinese army has never supported any hacking activities. And how could such a beautiful woman lie? Oh, Chai Lu, someday I'll make you mine. Number 9. Xi Jinping officially becomes president. And by president, I mean authoritarian dictator put in power through no actual democratic process. Same thing. In March, the 18th National People Congress was held. The NPC voted on who would be the next president, and everyone had a pretty strong feeling that Xi Jinping, the head of the Chinese Communist Party, would snag the victory. It was close, but in the end, Xi walked away with 99.86% of the votes. Amazing. He was also elected chairman of the Central Military Commission. And if you flash forward a few months to the 3rd plenum, Xi also put himself in charge of the new State Security Committee, which controls China's police and security forces. It's like he's amassing total power for himself. Who would have guessed? Which brings me to number 8, the Chinese Dream. Ever since Xi took charge, he keeps bringing up the Chinese Dream. Apparently, the United States never copyrighted the American Dream. Unfortunate oversight. So what is the Chinese Dream? Well, Xi has described it as the rejuvenation of the Chinese nation. Xinhua even has a full page of reports on how the Communist Party is already on its way to realizing the Chinese dream. Sounds inspiring, doesn't it? Almost makes me want to forget that Xi has total control over the Communist Party, government, military, and security forces. And Peng Liyuan's heart. Number 7. The Diaoyu, or Senkaku, or whatever island dispute. After World War II, Japan got control over a string of uninhabited islands in the East China Sea. Japan calls them the Senkaku Islands. But when it was discovered that they may sit on untapped oil reserves, suddenly China jumps in and says, no, they're the Diaoyu Islands and they belong to us. At the beginning of April, the Japanese government bought the islands off a private Japanese owner, igniting a wave of anti-Japanese protests throughout China. Tensions have been flaring and cooling all year. Then at the end of November, China officially established an air defense zone over a huge chunk of the East China Sea, which just so happens to include the Diaoyu Islands. Any aircraft flying through the air defense zone must identify themselves or else face the wrath of the Chinese Air Force. The United States responded by immediately flying 2 bombers through it. Number 6. Edward Snowden, the spy who loved me. Well, the US had the moral high ground for all of about 2 seconds. After the military hacking scandal broke, the US put a lot of pressure on China to stop what basically amounted to cyber warfare. Then, Edward Snowden leaked that the NSA is watching, well, just about everybody. Weird thing about him, though, was that after risking everything standing up for civil liberties, he fled to Hong Kong, a territory of China. A place that's not exactly big on protecting civil liberties. That made some speculate that maybe he was a Chinese spy all along, but if that were true, the NSA really wouldn't be doing a very good job of spying on everybody. But whatever motivated Snowden, he has basically made it impossible for the US to discuss cybersecurity with the Chinese regime, which probably suits the CCP just fine. They've got the whole cyber thing under control with number 5, the internet crackdown. In September, criticizing the Communist Party online became illegal, and anyone found guilty of spreading rumors online would be sentenced to 3 years in jail. The first victim of that policy was 16-year-old middle school student Yang Zhong. He was released after an international backlash. The same can be said for Charles Shui. He was a prominent internet celebrity who also happened to hire prostitutes for group sex. He was shackled and brought before CCTV cameras for a 10-minute-long confession. Nothing was said about prostitutes, but he did say how he contributed to an illegal and immoral atmosphere on the internet, and the new regulations on the web were great. Number 4. The trial and sentencing of Bo Xilai. We knew this one was coming for over a year. After more than a year out of the public eye, Bo Xilai, the once rising superstar of Chongqing, was given a totally open, transparent trial that most definitely did not have a predetermined outcome decided months ago. It was so transparent, journalists didn't even need to be allowed in the courtroom. Bo was given a life sentence for bribe-taking, embezzlement, and abuse of power. I'm sure it had nothing to do with those rumors that he and former Chinese security czar Zhou Yongkang tried to have Xi Jinping assassinated in a coup attempt. Speaking of Zhou Yongkang, he's also just apparently been put in detention. I have a feeling his totally transparent trial will be on the big events of 2014. Number 3. Reforms! Everywhere reforms! At the end of the third plenum, a policy-making meeting of top party leadership in November, China announced that they would be ending the reformation through labor system, and now Chinese people can have 2 kids instead of just 1. That is, some Chinese people can have 2 kids. Now, sure, ending the labor camp system was more about knocking the power base out from under Zhou Yongkang, and there are plenty of other de facto ways to detain people. And sure, the 2-child policy is more of a desperate attempt to make sure China doesn't become a country of senior citizens and hopefully finally get people to stop sex-selectively aborting baby girls. By 2020, there will be 24 million more men than women. But you have to give credit where credit is due, right? Number 2. Crackdown on journalists. Well, the Chinese regime has never been too fond of journalists. They keep trying to expose things. But the problem facing foreign journalists in China really gained public attention when Bloomberg News allegedly pulled a story about corruption in Chinese leadership, self-censoring to ensure their reporters in China could still get visas. Didn't help though, because in the beginning of December, Bloomberg, as well as the New York Times, got an early Christmas surprise. Their reporters can't seem to get their visas renewed. That could effectively shut down their operations in China. This was just after Paul Mooney, a veteran China reporter with 18 years of experience, was denied a visa because authorities weren't too happy about what he was writing. Without these guys, how are we to get uncensored news out of China? And finally, number 1. China put something on the moon. I mean, I do hear some news anchors being smug and saying, oh yeah, we put a man up there 40 years ago, but you know what? Getting a little remote-controlled car to drive around on the surface of the moon is a pretty big deal. You can count how many countries have done that on one hand. It's like the saying goes, shoot for the moon, it's under Chinese control. That's it, those are my top 10 news stories from this year in China. Be sure to check back later this week for my ranking of the top 10 craziest stories from 2013. Technically that comes out next year. So be sure to have a happy and safe New Year's. Thanks for watching this episode of China Uncensored. Once again, I'm Chris Chappell. I'll see you in 2014.